Hey, folks, for episode 73 of the Rental Roundtable, we had on Michael Larson. He's the co host of the Rental Journal podcast and also works at Larson's Air Conditioning Hire, based in Australia. First Australian guest we've had on. The Rental Journal podcast, if you don't know, is a hugely successful podcast, also in the equipment rental space. So definitely encourage you to go listen to that, the Rental Journal podcast. So the first part of the conversation talked about his background, how he got into hire, that's what they call it in Australia, or rental. Talk about the Australian rental market, which is less than 10% the size of the US, which is Australia, again, has the population of Texas and the size of the United States. So kind of get some context of what's going on in the Australian rental market. And we talked about all the learnings. He's had hundreds of episodes on the Rental Journal podcast. What have they learned? It's very interesting from my perspective to talk to another podcast host in the rental industry. So, really fun episode for me personally. Hope you guys enjoy listening to Michael. Everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 73. I have my friend Michael Larson on today. Michael, welcome to the show.
No, thanks very much, Kyle. I really appreciate, the opportunity of coming on here on the Rental Roundtable. I've really been looking forward to the conversation. I think personally, I tuned back in 2023. It would have been one of your very early episodes, around probably episode number 3, with the world famous face of US rental, and I'd probably class as the most, I'd say, connected man in the global rental industry, Josh Nickel, just after my first US campaign and trip across the land of the free in 2023. And I actually remember seeing yourself and the Quipli stand at the ARA show that I first went to in Orlando, but we didn't actually first meet in person until New Orleans that following year. So there's always someone interesting to see, someone interesting to meet, and some unique experiences to be had on the streets of New Orleans. But Kyle, you've done such a amazing job of creating such a invaluable and all-inclusive resource here, from highlighting such inspirational ground up journeys, multi-generational stories covering new technology shaping the future of rental, and all the way through to these age-old strategies that are consistently delivering success for rental companies. Even I love that recent episode you did with Joe and Josh from Catalyst, and how unreal it is to get the opportunity for us as listeners to hear these inside stories, strategies behind the exponential growth of United Rentals. And we, of course, can't skip past that series you did with the bearded genius, Coupon Savant, and face of rental at the moment, Elliot Vigil, on mastering rental growth. It was such a collection of golden nuggets, a true gold mine for anyone in the rental game. And the insights you're spotlighting here, mate, don't only give us these actionable tools to implement right away, but make us stop and think differently on how we can approach the rental experience. And now approaching 70 episodes. So, congratulations, mate. No, yeah, extremely excited and grateful to be here. Proud to be representing Down Under as your first international guest. And yeah, really looking forward to sharing my own experiences, some unique anecdotes, and hopefully some of it will resonate with the folks at home. So thank you very much.
Well, quite the intro, and everyone's going, man, this guy is a better orator than Kyle, who's the host. This guy should host the podcast. And if you don't know, Michael does host a podcast. I was on this podcast like 4 years ago, the Rental Journal podcast. Awesome podcast that Michael and Mark Simonson co-host together. Yeah, how many episodes you got? You got several hundred episodes at this point, I believe.
Yeah, we're in the hundreds, that's for sure. But yeah, we've had Mark, starting a long time ago, so we've had a lot more time in the seat, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I remember I've recognized you from all the podcast episodes you guys have done. You guys have to have the biggest podcast in the rental industry for sure. We're just a little off on the side here for the independents in the U.S. But I recognized you, and we were walking around New Orleans at the ARA show outside, and I think we were both like, I think we know each other, and that's how we met. And we've been able to stay connected. And you mentioned Josh Nickel. He texted me probably 5 minutes ago. His office, his rental company, is about 5 minutes from my house, so I go over there a lot to kind of see what's going on in the rental industry. So I'm very lucky to be that close to the face of rental. And you mentioned Elliot and all the awesome guests we've had on. The thing about this industry that is so awesome, which it's a very communal industry. People want to share, they want to give back, and that's what you're doing today, right? So Michael, for today's episode, you kind of have two different things to talk about today, right? You've got the Rental Journal podcast you host. You've done hundreds of episodes and all the learnings that you've kind of learned over the years. We want to talk about that. We also want to talk about, well, you work at an independent rental company in Australia, right? And by By the way, it's Tuesday night here in the US. It's Wednesday morning. So it's tomorrow. Man, I need to get the lottery tickets to buy because you're in the future, where you are. But Michael, I love to kind of share and kind of talk about your background story. How did you get here today? Did you grow up in rental? Tell me about your story.
Well, look, I'm happy to buy the lottery tickets, but we'll have to get them in US dollars because our Australian dollar at the moment is like monopoly money compared to your US dollar. But yeah, I guess you could say that I very much grew up in the rental industry. From my earliest memories, I've always been involved and around our business here in Queensland. So we're on the east coast of Australia, and like many people in family rental businesses or family businesses in general, Dad had me in the wash bay as quickly as humanly possible. From 5 years old, being on the end of a pressure washer or hand in the bucket of soapy water, and definitely wasn't concerned nor worried to aligning with child labor laws. I'll say that, but that's the beauty of family-owned rental businesses, right? But yeah, us here at Larson Air Conditioning Hire, we're a family-owned and operated rental business in Rockhampton in central Queensland on that east coast, like I said, of Australia, with a major focus on power and portable temperature control solutions in Queensland's heavy industry. And we also have a range of, complementary power distribution equipment and accessories all alongside our primary power and HVAC lineup, allowing us to provide, these turnkey and package solutions to support tier one contractors in the Australian mining industry, power stations, gas network, telecommunications, and we also do a lot with the government health sector. But being from central Queensland in Australia, our region is considered the world's quarry and a hub for coal and traditional grid scale power generation, and coal plants and coal mining industries are a major locational focus and huge driver for not only local employment, but bringing in, I think it's around $120 billion into the state's
Mm.
economy. So it's a natural driver not only for our niche segment of the rental industry, but the national industry as a whole. And yeah, like, as you mentioned, in parallel, also extremely fortunate enough to host the Rental Journal with Mark. Having exponential growth and has become, a leading global platform of these international rental insight stories and experiences. And it all originally started and founded, and all the success is 100% credited to Mark. Having an unbelievable partnership, and can't thank Mark enough to the opportunities he has blessed me with, the unbelievable environments the Rental Journal has provided me with, meeting so many unbelievable individuals such as yourself. And, I'm also very involved with our Australian Hire and Rental Association, serving as Queensland State Vice President for the HRA, with our outstanding state committee. And, very much like you said here, Kyle, a lot of your listeners being predominantly made up of independents and rental companies from that 1 to 10 locations. I've grown up, lived and I'm in this unique environment, 24/7, 365. So I'm extremely excited to jump into our discussion.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the Rental Journal podcast, the second part today. I'm very interested in that as one equipment rental podcast host to another. There's probably two of us or five of us in the world. There's less than 10. So there's a very small Venn diagram there. But related to your business, tell me about the origin of Larson's air conditioning hire. Did your father start it, grandfather? How many generations? Did you always know you wanted to be in rental? Because it sounds like at 5 years old, whether you wanted to or not, you were in rental. How did that all come to be?
Yeah, so I guess you would class myself as second generation. Business was started by my parents. It was kind of out of nowhere, to be honest. Dad started as a refrigeration mechanic and was looking for, like anyone that is maybe has that more entrepreneurial mindset, looking at other avenues to make an extra dollar. And he actually started with diesel tank or fuel tank rentals to the Australian telecom network. And it was very much not looking that I want to be into rental. It was just a natural thing that he did out of interest. He was always around agriculture, farming, and heavy equipment. So that's really was his entry into it without him even realizing. And then pairing that background with his knowledge and foundation of being a refrigeration mechanic went into, the portable HVAC. So yes, I guess like you said, like it or not, I was always involved, but my plan wasn't to be in the rental industry. Throughout my high school studies, I was actually training to become an international airline pilot, but I actually graduated in 2020. So aviation was not a very wise career move for a fresh high school graduate. So I was doing all of my studies, had got my recreational license, going to Qantas, who a lot of, even in America, Qantas is a pretty big brand. And they said, look, you know, we've had a pilot shortage, but now we've got no flights. So, all of our scholarships, our training were to get put on hold, and it left me kind of lost in a little bit of a way because you're so focused in one direction.
Mm.
But I'd always been around our business, always loved it. So that was kind of the plan, and naturally flowed me into our business. So always involved, but wasn't the direct career move for sure. But yeah, that's kind of our story and how it all started for Larson's here in Australia.
Yeah. At some point, we should combine all the episodes we've done and that you guys have done. And I want to understand people's career paths before they got into rental or what they thought they would be doing. Cause there's Rob Mays just came on a couple episodes and, he was going to go be a financial planner. So he's finance in college, was financial planners like, I got to get my hands dirty, get out. It's just too boring to me. Right. And everybody sort of has their path and something happens and they pivot into rental. I don't know if we've had anyone who's trained to be an airline pilot. So I guess do you still fly recreationally, or are you sort of that was my job I was thinking about. That seems like work to me. I got a podcast and a rental business to run. Do you fly at all anymore?
Well, yeah, the rental industry keeps me a busy boy, but no, I still,
Yeah.
yeah, like getting out flying, and it's still a passion either way, right? And that was the reason that any of
Mm.
us kind of stick into a career, is that it's a passion. So even though it might not be, the career now, it's still, just a love, and always wanting to be a lifelong learner for sure. So it keeps the brain ticking.
You traded one passion for another. What about the rental industry gets you excited? Like why decide to build your career in rental?
Yeah, well, I think it's that natural, I would say, um, love and drive for success in any family business that I love as well,
Mm.
not just rental. So I think rental is extremely unique in a lot of ways, but the actual environment of being a rental operator and as an independent, that's fueled by that collective drive towards something, and that's something that a lot of um, guests have mentioned to me, especially these 4, 5 generational rental businesses in the US. That continuation of legacy, that's exciting, and I think that's a really valuable aspect for sure. um,
Generational, right? It's generational. I've met one software company is in my software peer group. It's third generation. I've never heard of a third generation software company because they don't last, right? They get acquired and there's new platforms and AI but rental is something you can pass down generate. It's something that it's built to last, right? Which I think a lot of people resonate with. I want to talk about the Australian rental market. So as you know, from our list of some of our episodes, all US and some Canadian rental companies we've brought on. Tell me about the Australian rental market. How is that different than what we see in the US?
Yeah, well, I guess I should preface that we're quite small here in Australia. We're not only in population, but also our rental industry. We have a microscopic population of only 27 million people. Smaller than the population of Texas, spread across a land area not far off the size of the US. So we're
Mm,
extremely distributed, and our industry is quite small also. Well, I guess especially compared to the States.
mm,
Our equipment rental market's valued at just over 10 billion Aussie dollars, or 6.5 billion US, compared to the US sitting at over 80 billion. To further put that into perspective, and a silly way to view it, but United Rentals domestically in the US is larger than our entire Australian rental market.
mm.
So it is very different and very small. But we're experiencing great growth with our compounding, annual growth rate at 5.5%, whereas I think the US is sitting slightly above inflation currently. But I would say that our slightly higher growth is simply due to our much lower rental penetration percentage compared to the US. And the US is a huge benchmark. And what's so interesting is that growth is steady, but moderating, which is, really demonstrates your insane resilience around cycles in the US. But I'd say the main drivers for the rental sector here in Australia are definitely leveraged towards government infrastructure investments, enhanced mining activity, and seeing customers wanting to reduce their annual capex by choosing rental instead of ownership. So I'd say looking more towards headwinds, there are constantly inconsistent, I guess, structural trends, and we're always experiencing changes with our domestic energy transition, and construction activities itself is always slowing very cyclically. So I'd say energy constraints are definitely another factor, and the diesel generator market makes up a very large chunk of our industry, very much driven by our grid limitations and a huge amount around remote projects. Like I said, we're extremely spread out. So that's kind of a limitation. But we're seeing active exploration and implementation of alternative powered products regarding BESS,
Mm,
hybrid implementation, pairing generators with greener forms of power generation due to our alignment with more of the European standards, but still a major focus on traditional diesel. And I'd say the magic with this type of equipment here in the Australian market really is this logistical side. With our sites are currently exceeding, distances of 150 miles between each
mm,
other. So with the reduction of constant refueling, servicing, minimized labor, our lower operational costs and streamlining operations is allowing us to focus on, getting more rentals. And it's not just the sustainability side that's making this technology useful, especially when considering, this compounding cost of long-term rental applications, and looking at these products, like I said, with these remoteness issues and logistical hurdles that we have, and operational nightmares of distributed sites across our country that we encounter here in the Australian market. And we see service techs and field operators driving thousands of kilometers for interim servicing and avoidable breakdowns. It's also good to mention too that we're sitting and paying well over $4.50 US per gallon at, or an absolute minimum of $1.85 Aussie dollars per litre, if not $2.2 per litre for diesel in remote regions, which makes traditional power, operations huge compared to how much cheaper fuel is over in the US. So I'd say finding and retaining skilled technicians is tough as well in the
mm,
Australian rental industry. And I would say across the board for independents is the extreme barrier to entry and huge initial capital cost are a big factor, with Australian interest rates having pushed up financing, making it harder for smaller fleets to expand. And being a remote island in the middle of the Pacific, we do experience massive supply chain volatility. Now thinking back to COVID, it was a huge nightmare for us in rental, with equipment delivery delays, parts shortages just rippled across the entire sector. And one area that I believe Australia is an absolute leader in is having a very uniformed national regulatory system towards safety. We have massive
mm,
legislative frameworks, increasing union involvement, and more unified, I'd say, national safety standards. But, this compliance really stretches the administration side for independence, I would say. And that's what's so unique about our market, is that it's an unusual blend, that we have a market with strong underlying demand, but independents need to navigate these
mm,
external headwinds that I've mentioned regarding this constantly developing compliance and having to very much have smarter fleet choices, leverage customer-led service models, and not, overreacting to cycles, and very much anchoring their strategies for long-term success with all of these more structural shifts that we experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot there. One of the questions I have is just kind of ballpark comparing the US and Australia, right? So, in the US, rental penetration is 60% or so, and that's under penetrated compared to Europe and Asia. Where's Australia? Are you guys above or below the 60% number? Do you know?
Much below, much below. Yeah, I think looking at UK, Europe, even to a lot of the Asian markets, Japan, up at 80%. So,
Mm,
you guys think that you have a long way to go from 60, but we're sitting much lower than that.
mm,
And we do find that contractors, customers, we are classed as, the lucky country here in Australia, with these very large, um, generating and profitable industries probably makes us a little bit more fat and happy. So we like
mm.
to own our own stuff. But yeah, that's definitely our biggest uh, growth opportunity as an industry as a whole here in Australia is not how we can, take percentages of the pie off each other, just grow the collective pie in general. If we could
Mm.
go from 40% to 60% rental penetration, that growth would just be absolutely unreal. So, why cut rates and have a fight to the bottom when we can just increase the size of the pie?
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the companies they're fat and happy. They're happy to own the equipment. Is there anything else that's happening or in Australia that makes the penetration that low? Because in the U.S., people talk about how it's low and growing, and we got to get to where Europe and Asia are. Australia's like we're just trying to get to where the U.S. is, right? Like, is there any other underlying thing there? Is it like a mindset shift, or why is the penetration so low?
I would say, yeah, for sure, mindset shift. And also, like I said, we're so distributed. So having your own equipment, you kind of in a way working as very self-reliant. If you're in the middle of outback Australia, there's probably not a rental store. You need your own equipment, or the job's
Mm,
not going to get done. You're not going to get a service tech or a field tech out there to
yeah,
fix the piece of equipment. You need to fix it yourself. We're very resourceful here in Australia, that's for sure. So it's funny, and it's something that Anthony Durante, who a lot of your listeners probably have met, know of, or have heard of over the years. He said, when there's a big global, I guess, exercise or war going on, there's 10,000 US troops deployed, and there's like 20 Aussies. So we're small in numbers, but we make a big impact.
There you go, and I think your earlier point of this population of Texas spread across the whole U.S. Like, obviously, you have to be you have to be delivery distance from a rental company, and if you're going across the entire outback, it's hard, right? I think there's an element of like, well, is the rental company going to be reliable? Are they going to be able to get to me? I'm just going to own my own stuff, right? There's like a real physical limitation to being in Australia, right? Um, Tell me some about what it's like being a specialty equipment rental provider, right? Because we've had on a lot of companies who are either more general tool or just kind of general versus the specialty side. Specialty side trades at higher multiples, and there's a lot more private equity action around the specialty size, at least what I'm seeing recently. Tell me what it's like operating in the specialty niche. How is that different than being general tool? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I guess what I first think of when discussing solutions-based rental is that you're really delivering engineered outcomes, not just supplying or selling machines or what we class as simply, dry renting equipment. You're acting as more of a knowledgeable partner and championing the customer, through a targeted rental experience with an
Mm,
overarching goal or an outcome looking to be achieved. And at the
right.
end of the day, customers aren't just renting machines, they're renting that certainty, compliance, looking to enhance project efficiency and uptime, and wanting their problem fixed at the end of the day. So they want a problem solver to assist them in providing outcomes in the complex world that we operate in. So, for us, we apply solutions based rental across a range of heavy industry use cases. focusing predominantly, like I mentioned, on those mining operations with supplying and developing, cooling and ventilation equipment solutions to protect workers from heat stress, maintain air quality in confined space environments, and ensure, continued critical operations. With our power station clients that we support, having critical environments where machines can, generate extreme levels of heat, well over 100 degrees, with reduced airflow, and these team members having to perform very physical tasks in these environments. For example, we'll deploy heavy industrial HVAC units and dehumidification systems to maintain stable conditions and controlled air environments, for many sensitive maintenance projects to shutdowns and turnarounds with coding projects, refining work often operate, with strict temperature control and humidity levels to deliver, optimal and, optimal saleable products as well. So we deliver very much a turnkey package to keep these shutdowns on track, compliant, and provide an enhanced environment for the on-site maintenance or inspections team that are performing and wanting to do the best they can with these immense heat levels that we get here in Australia. So the difference is that I guess in basic terms, our clients aren't just hiring an air conditioner and that's it. They're hiring that certainty, that support, that service, and that their project will stay compliant, safe, and on schedule. And technical support throughout the duration as well, and unmatched expert service through the process to maintain and maximize all of these aspects. So I would say that's the deliverable for sure.
Yeah, it's the full package. It's the certainty it's going to work. It's the reliability. It's the communication, and that's why if you can have this, a specialty equipment company in a niche that you're just the best at that particular thing, you can generally charge a higher price, therefore trade at a higher valuation, which is why the specialty companies are valued
Yeah.
more. When you think about your competitors, like who are do you have a lot of competitors? Are the nationals independent? Is it sometimes the competitor being the groups who are just I'm gonna do it myself and I'm gonna buy it? Like who are your main competitors in your market?
Yeah, so for us in the heavy industry space, there's a lot more national and
Mm,
multinational players.
mm,
So a lot of people would have heard of Agreco internationally. So they're
mhm,
I would class as very much the biggest truly global rental company. I think they're in over 30 countries
mm.
in around the world. So they're a massive player, and we also have a few other larger corporates as well, focus on that heavy industry. With our specialty equipment, there's not a lot of customer ownership in the space just because it is so targeted, it's so niche and so specific. When I'm saying that lower rental penetration is very much towards that, construction general tool, and things like that. That's very much customer owned led. But like you mentioned, we're seeing exponential growth and a huge US rental market trend towards growing industry emphasis of customers seeking specialty rental equipment, always with a major focus on power, HVAC, pumping, shoring, trenching, and large scale compressed air solutions. So I'd say specialty rental growth has had massive upside in the last decade, with the amazing tech, sophistications and emission standards driving these products' interests as well, or equipment enhanced with tech, with telematics, data analytics, dashboards, or leverage with sustainability focus to compliance and greener fleets. So, and it's worthwhile mentioning, these ancillary equipment models that come with specialty rental from cables, attachments, distribution gear, driving extra revenue, all with great ROI for rental operators when providing these engineered, driven solutions. So seeing so many of your national players in the US investing heavily and oftenly, I think reporting double-digit growth in these segments versus, more flatline or, if not in some instances, declining rental revenues in the US.
Mm. And so you mentioned the nationals, multinationals are your main competitors. And how do you differentiate yourself? How do you build a brand as an independent rental company? How do you really, stand out in a crowded space? In this competitive world and it's getting more competitive. how do you guys do that as an independent? You don't have the resources a national does or a multinational. How do you guys do that?
100%. And I've really put, knowing that we are going to dive into this topic today, I really put a thought into not only how we approach solutions-based rental, but I think there's a few non-negotiable pillars that are really required to be
Mm,
successful in this space. And especially as an independent, like you said, operating against companies with much more resources, larger fleets, and probably access to a lot more opportunities as well with larger projects that they have with national contractors and other companies. So I think we can really break it down into three, being unmatched service, continuous product revision, and having an expert team. So I'd say, the first necessity is really having this hyper-focused customer service from fast quoting, proactive communication, site inspections with the client, post-project engagement, displaying before and after metrics to show, what ROI you actually delivered and the value that you're providing to the customer. You have to be perpetually dissatisfied and relentlessly looking to enhance product design. That's the biggest thing. Product that's perfectly configured to solve the specific customer constraints, having a process of, continuous refinement. Um, every development needs to improve something from the team's competency, the equipment itself, and all of the support processes. I think it's very similar to, you probably heard of Toyota's framework around continuous improvement, which is,
mhm,
coined as I think it's called the Toyota way or Kaizen approach, which very
mhm.
much emphasizes this culture of ongoing incremental improvements made by for all processes as well. So I think knowing that it's, not just within um, not just within my generation, and I think it was released well before I was even, a thought for my parents, but, it very much relates to the statement from the original Karate Kid movie back in 1984, when everything is kung fu, that true mastery or, or any skill that needs to be found in any action or endeavor in life. Um, you know, really needs to be constantly refined through consistent effort over time and continuous improvement across all aspects, which I think is so critical in, supplying equipment targeted to specific customer requirements. So, and then I would say, yeah, the final one has to be staff knowledge. Having
Mm.
individuals trained as problem-solving engineers, the ability to troubleshoot, link past experiences with the current scenario, and most importantly, possessing this ability to articulate and successfully communicate these solutions to the customers is the biggest thing. And I'm going to steal a concept from an amazing mentor of mine, Aileen Hiskins from Strategic Alignment Training in Melbourne, who actually facilitates our Young Professionals program here for the Australian Hire Association. In rental, I really believe that you have to be curious. You have to have a child's mind and constantly ask those why questions.
Mhm.
So, as our brain develops, as children, we're constantly curious. We're seeking answers to all, and most of the time, we're probably annoying the hell out of our parents. But it allows us to discover more and more about the world around us. And but we lose this kind of mind plasticity and seeking this constant, state of curiosity as we get older. But we need this
Mm.
approach for solving solutions for customers. Just like a doctor, you need to keep poking and prodding until you find the root problem, which can then be, successfully treated and discovered.
Totally agree. The curiosity, and I think when I talked to Mark, 2021, when I was on the Rental Journal podcast episode, I don't know, 30 something maybe. He asked about sort of why we started Quipli, and I didn't have any rental experience. I rented one thing, and I was sort of started asking questions, and that beginner's mindset sometimes can be, it can be a blessing, right? But you gotta move past beginner's mindset. You got to start asking questions, understand why. One of the things we started with online renting was like we started talking to rental companies, and they were like, "Oh, customers don't want it." So I started talking to the end renters and say, "Would you like to transact online?" And they were like, "Absolutely," right? So it was interesting. Like sometimes that you got to go several levels deep, and that curiosity, asking those why questions is important. And I think on the product revision side of things, I think about the law of entropy. everything sort of descends to chaos over time. And I think about my living room with my little kids and like clean it every morning, every night, and at night it's just like a total wreck. I don't know how it happens, but the pillows are everywhere, the toys are everywhere. And I think from your product perspective, you constantly have to be iterating and improving. And if you had to say like the most important thing, so you said unmatched service, the constant product revision, the expert team. If the What's the number one thing that really matters as an independent rental company, at least in Australia? What's been the secret to your success?
Yeah, I would say it's the relationships, right? And relationships
Mm,
come from this consistent and genuine interactions, not
mm,
shortcuts or, looking for one-time deals. And I think it actually perfectly ties into, and it's something that I love from
yeah.
Elliot Vigil is and something we spoke about on the Rental Journal is his 7 secrets to mastering the art of influence. And I actually have a few of them written on my monitor here on some sticky notes. And number one is speak their why.
Mm,
Tap into someone's emotional drivers is so key, connecting your message to their values, their goals and their aspirations. And Elliot's secret number five, mastering the art of active listening, which he says,
mm,
truly listen to understand the other person's needs and concerns, show and earn respect to create a genuine space for connection. I think he's nailed it there. I really do. And that's something that, from my time that I spent with CES Power during my international exchange program with the American Rental Association really displayed to me, how this unbelievable power of building, powerful relationships via a powerful sales team. That they really
mm,
have hired right at CES Power. They've nurtured their key accounts and successfully expanded into new markets without losing their niche by targeting and servicing overlooked customer groups as well. Delivering comprehensive service with their power and HVAC infrastructure very much just targeted for live events, built on this customer centricity as well. Again, product excellence and continued innovation, mastering that approach to, I guess, people call the blue ocean strategy, competing in untapped markets instead of crowded ones, and now taking them globally. And as a niche player, you can't be everything to everyone. It's simply not achievable. And a golden nugget from one of the ARA Shop Talk podcasts that I listened to, and that's always stuck with me, and perfectly linked to this conversation today, is that the key is to find those that you can serve who are currently underserved. And my favorite quote is that a focused idiot will always beat a distracted genius. So, I really think that the parallel lesson from my experience of
mm,
CES was that even though they specialize in live events, from concerts, broadcasts to the world's largest forms and stages of entertainment, and here at Larson's, we're very much targeted towards Australian heavy industry. We both operate with a solutions first, customer focused model. So the key takeaway really is that no matter the vertical, if it's live events, heavy industry, the formula is the same. That the
mm.
engineered reliability, customer-led product design, and knowledgeable staff produces amazing trust, builds long-term relationships, and hopefully, enhance rental margins. So, as a solutions-based or niche equipment rental provider, your biggest differentiator isn't price; it's the maniacal focus on the customer's overall rental experience. And you have to have value-based pricing as well, not presenting the equipment as an itemized commodity. You know, if you're very much instead itemizing every hose, duct, or cable, it's more of a presentation of the entire solution as a
Mhm.
turnkey package. And from my perspective, very much looking towards the future for solutions-based rental equipment, and from what we're seeing from the leaders, going to the next level, solidifying long-term success as a niche player, is very much from this service differentiation for sure.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a lot of great things there. I love Elliot. His 7 secrets. The first one is the why. I want to get to the last topic here, which is the Rental Journal podcast, which I'm very excited to talk about. Why host that, right? Because you got your whole thing. You got your whole rental business you're running. You like to fly airplanes sometimes, right? Why take on hosting a Rental Journal podcast? How'd you get connected to Mark, and why did you decide to help with that?
Yeah, it was funny how worlds collided, right? So I come back from the US, following my time with CES and connected with Mark again. I went on the podcast with Mark a few, I'd say 18 months previously, after doing the Young Professional program here in Australia and winning our Young Professional of the Year award. And yeah, basically went to Sydney, sat down with him and discussed my US campaign with CES, and kind of flowed in perfectly to, coming on and starting a partnership with him, and hosting um hosting some episodes. And the Rental Journal has, had incredible success, and again, all goes back and all credit goes to Mark, who's absolutely pioneered this resource, and so thankful just to be a part associated with it, and hopefully contributing and building to, I'm sure, continued future success. And it's been an unreal journey. But Mark originally started the Rental Journal as a blog and then transitioned it into a podcast very much before
Mm,
podcasts were even considered super mainstream or a hot medium of media for longer content and conversations, especially, within the rental industry. But
mm,
reflecting, now on our approaching 200 collective, episodes of individuals from all across the globe, all with various, origins and all distinctively unique walks of life, from people like myself born into the rental industry, multi-generational in some instances, century-old rental operations, to people that, like we said, have fallen into rental, starting as salespeople, as a yard hand, a truck driver, working their way to the top, large corporate CEOs to single location business owners. So, this is the part that I love, and that I'm so thankful for this opportunity with the Rental Journal. And the beauty of our industry is the multivariable personalities, unique walks of life, and individuals that we're all fortunate enough to call collective industry peers. It's extraordinary, and it makes our industry exciting. And that's the pleasure that I get. Is highlighting these stories, and having a platform that we can capture these unique journeys,
mm.
for sure.
It's definitely, I feel it's an honor to be able to have a platform to have people share their stories, and as for me, I don't feel like I'm anything special. I'm not a particularly talented host. I just like to let people tell their stories because this industry is, it's allowed us to create our business. It's been an amazing industry. It welcomed me as an outsider, right? And continues to welcome me and everybody else into the industry. And I just feel very honored to be able to have people like yourself come share your story. What are some of your highlights or personal, not necessarily particular stories, but like highlights hosting the Rental Journal podcast? What have been some of the high points for you?
Yeah, I guess when discussing the top collective insights, the common themes or
Yeah.
frequently discussed topics, and key consistencies across all of our guests over, past half decade of the Rental Journal, that there's so many. But I think we can really break it down, and I've put a lot of thought into it as well, and I've broken it
Mm,
down into five consistently, I guess,
mm,
prevalent insights, and five key areas that we get on the Rental Journal from all of our guests. I'd say number one, and I'm probably a bit biased, but number one has to be the power of family legacy, the strength of
mm,
multi-generational businesses, and the value of independent rental companies. From the top of mind, and our 2025 guests like Avery DeBoos from Rental Guys, to
yep,
legends like Robert Pedersen at a tool shed equipment rental starting during World War II over 80
mm,
years ago, and has successfully transitioned now into the fourth generation of family ownership. Discussing succession planning, mentorship, balancing tradition with innovation, which has
mm,
been so critical for their survival. And even if we look at fewer than 30% of family rental businesses make it to the second generation, let alone to their
mm,
fourth. So massive credit
mm,
to those guys. To my good mate, a one of a kind and the extraordinarily unique Anthony Durrani story. Growing up crushing the world of New York construction equipment rental with his father, his uncle, brother, and cousins, to then building his own ventures, growing Durante Rentals to over 10 store multi-location rental operation. New York's one of New York's largest before their recent acquisition to Herc, to now moving over to the world of rental software, taking his immense learning, success, and years of accumulated experience into developing insightful rental dashboards. to make rental companies more data driven. So, he's the human depiction, human definition of what success means in the rental industry, right? And we can't discuss legacy, dominance, exponential industry fueled expansion, and who I class as the true pioneers of the Australian rental industry without mentioning Andy Kennard and Kennard's Hire. You know, they originally started with one of their rural supply customers asking if they could borrow a concrete mixer over buying one. And I think the quote was that Wally said that I won't lend you the mixer, but I'll hire it to you, which is what we call rental here in Australia. And that's how it started. Kennards has now over 200 locations across Australia, and they've
Mm.
just expanded into New Zealand with a original origin story of, supplying a concrete mixer back, many, many years ago. And I think it's, not only visible when looking at their origin story, but the Kennards Hire organization today. That family narrative is so central still. So all of these individuals that I've highlighted really display how, spanning generations are, very much deeply committed to these values, local service, long-term growth, and really emphasizes how legacy and perseverance drives sustained success in the rental industry, and authentic identity for their brands as well. So I'd say that's why those individuals really, really, really grow. I'd say number two would have to be all of the buzzword areas that ever developing what's hot topics, whether that's rental companies looking to integrate or leverage various technologies, to changing discussions around market cycles, domestic construction to emphasis on government changes, policies, tariffs, uh, forecasted future expectations, sustainability, logistics and telematics, online platforms, benchmarking. The list really, really is endless. So I'd say, we're very much seeing sustainability as a mandate and opportunity. When discussing this with Tim Helfers, for example, at Globe Power here in Australia, really illustrated how, their work in combining battery storage with solar and traditional power is not only aligning with the prescribed mandates, but it's actually delivering amazing commercial returns for rental businesses internationally, having amazing case studies, displaying this commercial viability from Australian infrastructure all the way to remote regions of the Australian outback. And even Mark had an episode with Justin Pitts from Blue Diamond Machinery, displaying these, alternative products that they're developing with global manufacturers. They even lit up the entire Eiffel Tower back in 2021. These new technologies are so exciting for the rental industry. To During my time in Vegas this year within Tempo Software, learning about how their exploration of AI during route planning is reducing third-party transport costs for rental businesses, and that smart logistics is going to drastically boost and change the future approach to how all rental businesses operate. And I'd say that we're very much seeing a generational shift with the incoming stream of younger customers embracing and valuing the access over rental, over ownership, and very much influenced by this Uber and Airbnb mindset that we all
Mhm.
have now. And very much, from my perspective, rental is kind of counter cyclical. That customer uncertainty paired with, these high interest rates are very much pushing customers and contractors towards renting over buying. Uh, Buying for sure. And this is probably something that you could touch on as well, Kyle, with your, more background with Uber as well.
Yeah, for sure, and I think the whole mindset shift going from the ownership towards rental, I mean, we've talked about that in a lot of episodes, but that is something that's increasing over time, and I think the younger generation is more comfortable with it. They don't necessarily need to own everything. They just want, like you said, they want a solution, they want a job to be done. How you get there, buying or renting is less important. So, I wanna get back to you mentioned a several, I think you said 5 takeaways. So you mentioned family legacy, you mentioned the hot topics. What are the other 3 things?
Yeah, I would say number three would have to be leadership development, the power of
Mm,
mentorship, the value in continuous education and learning, internal workforce development, evolving your company's culture,
mm,
and empowering internal development. within the rental industry. It's such a beautiful part of our industry. The collaboration, mentorship, openness to sharing, and open dialogue
Yeah.
of conversations, even between competitors, to uplift the entire industry it's so unique. And I recently heard a quote was that life is an open book test, which I think perfectly, encapsulates, not only what we do in rental, but, the rental community. Both the
Mm,
ARA and HRA shows, spotlight, programs like Rental U, Women in Rental, Young Professionals, which is really
mhm,
building our next generation of leaders. Talking to Tony Connor on the Rental Journal with the ARA's Born for This campaign, that they're looking to gain interest for careers in rental from the beginning of childhood. Having various videos of kids playing in the sandbox that then transition to a future life in rental. To guests like Tyler Carroll's experience, having the exchange program with United Rentals really revealed to me, the power and impact of international exposure that, individuals can gain from these opportunities. Mentorship is such a powerful driver within the rental industry. Hearing so many amazing leadership stories from my episode with Tom Wood discussing his exchange program with the Toolshed Equipment Rentals,
mm,
seeing the current ARA chair and owner of a toolshed, Robert Pedersen, stopping to continually, personally and purposefully connect with every employee daily, highlighting this culture of continuous care for employees, developing an unbreakable competitive advantage. To a mentor of mine, having the immense pleasure of capturing HRA Hall of Famer Tony Crane's story. His journey truly embodies mentorship and leadership longevity. Serving as such a long-term industry mentor, championing women in rental as well, and having sat as a state president for decades of service. To the time I spent with John Jinglenaut and the team at Rental Max in 2023 before their acquisition to Sunbelt, battling the struggles of an aging mechanic workforce by partnering with tech schools to attract younger talent. I really believe that rental hinges on workforce development, inclusive leadership, and a culture first strategy that attracts people but also retains this, key talent. So I'd say cultivating leadership through this foundation of mentorship, inclusion, and recognition is so vital, and for us to be successfully resilient and high performing with people in our rental workplace. I'd say the fourth would have to be the nucleus of the rental experience, which would be customer service. Innovations in service diversification and growth strategies. My episode with Craig Palmer from Classic Hire in Perth really showcased, how their regional scaling from a single location to 8 locations across Western Australia was simply contributed to consistently unmatched service, to gaining an
mm,
unbreakable customer base, to one of my absolute favorite episodes and an unbelievable conversation with Gab Robinson, who is steering the ship at Harry the Hirer, and they're the largest rental provider in the um, event space in the Southern Hemisphere. This really emphasized their specialization approach to, their event clients, maniacally niching and refining the entire product line for each major event client from Formula One to the Commonwealth Games. All of these individuals really displayed that growth is via service excellence, tailored inventory, and continual service development. So I'd say, yeah, number four has to be customer service. And the final one has to be the limitless opportunities for career progression, building a successful career in rental, global collaboration, and industry networks for sure. An Aussie icon here in Australia is Greg Parfitt's journey. He come to Australia from South Africa with a surfboard. Being
mm,
introduced to a company called National Hire, which many Aussies would know, a real pioneer in the access equipment hire space here in Australia, where aerial lifts were classed at the time as a niche product. Obviously now they're mainstream, but back then that they weren't.
mm,
Having various large roles across Australia, leading sales teams of hundreds of reps, being involved in many successful acquisitions over his career, with National Hire and Coates to Orange Hire and United Rentals moved to Australia. This journey truly underscores the limitless possibilities of career progression and growth avenue opportunities, for long-term career success that people can gain in the rental industry. So I would say that, the last one really has to be the limitless opportunities that people can gain for a career in rental.
Mm. I love that. Well, we bring on all these rental companies that decades of experience. You've been able to accumulate hundreds of people with decades of experience, so thousands of years of rental experience. My main takeaway hearing you talk about all this is, it's really about the people, right? You didn't say equipment and the new trends in technology and equipment this and that. It's you talked about family legacy and leadership development and customer service and career progression. It's around people, right? And growing together. And I think that's the beautiful thing is what you've done to Rental Journal podcast. You've brought people together. You've brought decades and hundreds of people across decades. It's thousands of years of experience you've been able to accumulate, right? And that's what I love so much about the rental industry. It's about the people. So with that, Michael, last question I like to ask people is best career advice you've gotten that's helped shaped your success in your career.
Yeah, I would say for sure, and what you've described, here, Kyle, is the majority of your listeners are independent. So, I think
Hmm,
what actually moves the needle, for us smaller players that are looking to build, a loyal community, and a authentically unique brand, whilst, you know, um, considering, our limitations and potentially not having, the larger corporate budget. I would say the core frame and non-negotiable is that, this authenticity, really breeds relatability, right? So I'd say from customers, employees, and even competitors gravitate towards, real people solving real solutions over a glossy corporate branding. So to me, for us as independent rental companies, we have such a built-in advantage. We have real stories, we have real struggles, and
hmm.
and the wins are personal. That's what
Yeah.
resonates with people. And you can see over the decades, some of the world's biggest brands are tied to an individual like Richard Branson, Virgin is
Mm,
his own personal brand. Storytelling stunts, showing up year after year. Customers, first seem to trust a person, then they trust a
mm,
brand, right?
mm,
Especially during my time with CES Power and staying up to date with what's happening in your market, really makes you realize that the challenges are the same no matter where you are. You know, um, even saw that a recent post from an ARA member on a piece of stolen equipment. The comment section turned into a support group. Nobody jumped in with like a glossy press release. It was raw, it was useful, and that's what really matters. So I think you can really see that authenticity is a global currency in rental, whether you're in Tennessee, Georgia, like like yourself, or regional Australia. Candid, real stories resonate, and I would say that's why we've had so much, success and so many folks tuning into the Rental Journal. Because operators around the world want to tune in to hear, not just how people succeed, but how they struggle and adapt. And it's why associations like the HRA, the ARA are so powerful. They give us these spaces to share these real experiences. So, for independent rental owners listening today, don't underestimate the power of your own story. Offer
mm,
value from the jump. And Elliot's such an amazing example of this. He shares checklists, insights, lessons on LinkedIn, events, breaking industry news topics, and open discussions for his followers. They're so engaging, educational, whilst also driving traffic towards his brand, not necessarily a rental store, but being himself, Elliot. So I'd say another aspect that's so impactful is to actively collaborate and proactively participate with others. You really get what you give, I think, in
mm,
rental. Connect with those across the broader industry, facilitate opportunities where you can combine your expertise, cross-pollinate your value to enhance your collective, you know, brand perception and impact across the industry. Speak at events, volunteer it with associations, seek mentorship from peers, and I really believe mentorship has limitless impact, for sure. So yeah, I'd say that the real levers would have to be consistency, authenticity, and really contributing to building and making the industry stronger.
Yeah, well, you live that with what you do with the Rental Journal podcast, everything you give back to the industry. I'm a fan of yours, fan of Mark, and I look forward to seeing you in Orlando at the ARA show. For listeners, Michael will be there, probably recording some episodes, I believe, right? So maybe we can get an audience and watch it live. But anyways, Michael, thank you for everything you do for our awesome industry, and thank you for coming on today.
No, thank you, Kyle. It's been an absolute pleasure to come here on the world famous Rental Roundtable now. It's been a true privilege to have this conversation to represent the rental industry from down under. And, you know, I think we said the first international guest, not from the US or from Canada. So I've loved the foundation, like you said today, of our conversation has really been relating to the frame that our industry isn't about machines. It's about solutions and people, right? Whether you're in
Mhm.
Australia, doing live events in the US, or the independents looking to build their personal communities, the common trend really is the saying that customers don't just rent equipment, they rent people and they rent expertise. So I love that. I love this international collaboration that our industry has, the ability to share, join forces, and learn from each other to have a strong future and long-term success for all. So, Kyle, thank you for everything you do, the amazing resource you provide here, and shout out to all the outstanding individuals that you've had on over the last couple of years. So, really appreciate your time, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.